Recording in progress.
It is 4:30 on Thursday, August 22nd, 2024. And I call this meeting of the Meridian Historic Preservation Commission to order. Roll call. Blaine Johnston's here. Patrick Giddings.
Here.
Pam Jagosh. I know she's here. Ken Freeze.
Here.
Jack Keller. Deborah Pitts. Heather Giacomo.
Here.
Thank you. Adoption of the agenda.
I move that we adopt the agenda.
I second it.
Motion by Commissioner Giddings, seconded by Commissioner Freeze for adoption of the agenda. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Approval of our minutes of our July 25th meeting.
I move to approve the minutes of the July 25th meeting.
I second that.
Motion by Commissioner Giddings, seconded by Commissioner Freeze for approval of our minutes of our July 25th meeting. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Approval of our monthly financial statements. Ms. Schiffler, do you have any updates for us?
We did have another invoice from Sherry at JUB, and we have a final win anticipated next month, but hasn't been processed yet.
Thank you. Do we have a motion?
I move that we approve the monthly financial statement.
Second that.
Motion by Commissioner Freeze, second by Commissioner Giddings for approval of our monthly financial statement. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. New business, item 3, Meridian Speedway to receive Ada County Treasurers Award. This award is granted or issued from Ada County Historic Preservation Council, and they've elected the Speedway to receive that award this year. I don't know if they have an exact date. At one time I heard October 26th. I don't know if that's set in stone or not. Schiffler.
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, Barbara nominated the Speedway, and they did select it. And the Ada County Historic Preservation Council did mention that date, and Barbara, but we haven't heard back from the Speedway or the Dairy Board about whether that works for them, so that is a very tentative date.
Okay, that's what I thought, but I just put that out there. If we get more news on that or date or anything, we will pass that on to the commission. With that, we'll go on to item 4, purchase of National Register Historic Places plaque for the Speedway. Ms. Schiffler, can you give us a little update on that, please?
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, thank you. So related to what we were just talking about for the Speedway, the hope is that maybe we would have the plaque in time for a ceremony if we can get one done. So if approved, I had the quote, I did send that out to commissioners ahead of time in the email. It's for $509.20 with a proof. So if approved, then I can move forward with that, and we would get it in time for the October very tentative date. Although we haven't, we don't have a location or anything yet, but can use this year's funds and get going on the plaque.
If I read that memo correctly, it was 5 to 7 weeks delivery time. So yeah, if we order it now, if we have presentation end of October, we would have that plaque at that date. I think even if we don't have a permanent location, we at least have it there at the presentation of those awards. So do we have a motion to approve the purchase of that plaque for $509.20?
I move that we approve the purchase of the plaque from Meridian Speedway in the amount of $509.20.
I second that.
Motion by Commissioner Giddings, seconded by Commissioner Freeze, to approve the purchase of historic plaque for the Speedway for the sum of $509.20. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Thank you very much. We're moving along quickly. Presentations. Mr. Persons, you have the floor.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, thank you for allowing me to join you today. I don't think I've ever had the pleasure of meeting the Historic Preservation Commission, but I did want to give an introduction of myself since some of you probably don't know who I am. So I am Bill Parsons. I am the current planning supervisor for the city of Meridian. I have been with the city for 17 years. So I have been with a planner the entire time that I've been with the city. So I'm very familiar with the vision for the city, not only long range, but also the current planning side of things. So my role here is I manage the current planning team. So all of the development you see around the city, that's what we're in charge of reviewing, anywhere from sign permits, commercial buildings, subdivisions, open space, et cetera. And then today, I want to kind of touch on two topics. I was asked to come here and talk about what is Old Town zoning, but I think it's also just as important to talk about the framework on how we got to Old Town zoning. So in 1984 is when the city first adopted its first subdivision and zoning ordinance, and Old Town has been around since that time. So it's nothing new to the city. It is one of our traditional neighborhood districts that we often use. We also have traditional neighborhood residential and traditional neighborhood commercial. But the reason why I want to spend some time on the framework is because in state code, we have the Local Planning Act that requires the city to adopt a comprehensive plan. And that is the framework or the guide, the vision, the broad visionary document that sets the policies and our future land use map to support zoning. Under our comprehensive plan, we also have to adopt what's called a future land use map, which is called a FLUME. It's our acronyms. And you can see here in this graphic that I'm presenting to you today is that area outlined in pink. That is what we designate as Old Town. So essentially everything within the boundary of this comprehensive plan, a property owner could come to the city and request to change the zoning on their property. So in this area, not all of the areas bound in this area are zoned Old Town. There's R8, there's R15, there's commercial zoning, and but the vision for the city is over time, these properties will come in and either redevelop, use an existing structure that may exist on the property, or assemble a bunch of property and do something similar across to the east of us where you may get a big, large, vertically integrated building. So again, an Old Town zone and a comp plan's one thing, it's visionary, it's not law. Zoning is law. So there's specific requirements that an applicant or a property owner has to follow and meet the law. So not necessarily have to, the comp plan, depending on whether or not they're going to rezone the property, we have to make sure that the zoning matches what the comp plan says. That's how those two relate and correlate with one another. But there's also other documents that we use. I don't know if the commission is aware of this or not, but there's also what we call a destination downtown plan. And that is a document that's referenced in our comprehensive plan, but it's not necessarily managed by the city. It's, as you know, we have an urban renewal district as part of our downtown area. And this was a plan that was adopted probably, I think I was part of it in 2008. And that also sets some framework for the various districts in our downtown. And that's what this graphic here represents. You can see here, I won't go into the details too much, but essentially the area that's part of your downtown area, your Historic Preservation Commission area, there are certain themes or at least districts that are established under that. Keep in mind, this does not relate to zoning. It only references some frameworks, so hey, this area could look like this, or this is how we see it redeveloping with these design themes. But again, it's not related to zoning in any ways. It's just to help us guide that vision when someone comes in with a development proposal to talk about what they can do to potentially, again, reuse an existing building or maybe scrape the building and start new and build from new construction. The reason why I highlighted the area, again, a lot of this excerpts are taken right out of the plan. So the plan has not only a map that we follow, but it also has policies or text as part of that plan. And this was what's defined in the comprehensive plan as far as what Old Town land use means. And so the reason why I highlighted these areas is because I wanted to show you it means we want office, we want retail, We want restaurants, theaters, places for people to gather. And then at the same time, we want you to either, it could mean you could reuse a building to do that. I think a good example of that is as you drive down Main and you head north, you can see a lot of the old historic homes that you guys are part of. They've been converted to commercial businesses, and that's what Old Town envisions. But if someone came to us and there was an older home on the property and it was not part of your purview, the applicant or the property owner could propose to remove that structure and they could build something new on the site, provided they met all the zoning regulations. So although the Old Town is meant to help preserve or reuse existing, it also means we want you to intensify and go higher or go vertical on a piece of property. And that's why we speak to new construction, and we also speak to vertically integrated, so we'd have commercial on the ground floor and then maybe residential or office on that. And as I get to the zoning code, I'll show you some examples of where that is in the code, of how we speak to that or how we require that as part of it. And then also, I think you're probably aware, the city also requires design review for any new structures, not necessarily historical structures. So if someone were to reuse a new building and they weren't going to change anything to the exterior, we probably wouldn't require anything because we're going to keep what you have, preserve what you have. But again, we do have a specific set of guidelines in our architectural standards manuals, the term that we use for that document, and it does say if you do this and provide these details. But I would mention to the commission that more work is needed on that for the downtown area. We don't specifically say in downtown we want these specific things to happen. I know a few years ago, our long-range planning staff presented that thought to council. At the time, there were other priorities that were more important to the city, and so we kind of parked that discussion for a later date. But at least from a planning staff perspective, we certainly, at some point in time, we do want to at least tackle that topic and adopt some new standards that would be codified in code and supported by the comprehensive plan. So now I'll transition to Old Town a little bit and show that correlation. So as I mentioned to you, Old Town zoning is the tool that we use to implement the vision, the plan. Again, it's a set of express standards that's required by law. So this is where we go from you should do these things to you shall do these things in our world. And in our code, we also speak to what Old Town District is, the purpose of it. You can see it speaks to intensification, but it also says protect and preserve what we have. So I think you strike a balance there. And in my experience with the city, I've seen where I can go down Washington Street and see where some have converted buildings to commercial buildings. At some point, we've had residents convert homes to restaurants. And they've been very successful at doing that. Myself, I'm a proponent of keeping some of the old homes. I think I like the character of the older homes more than our typical suburban subdivisions that we have in Meridian. I think it's neat to see that and see that integrated in with the fabric of the new and changing at least the dynamics of a eclectic downtown that I think Old Town tries to bring. Also, Old Town also encourages a broad mix of commercial, so it's really a mixed-use designation for a property owner. Again, if someone wanted to buy an old home or an existing home in downtown and wanted to convert that to a triplex or a duplex, Old Town would allow that. You don't have to tear it down, but you can go through the building department and propose more units on that property, and that's encouraged. Or they could have residential on the bottom, and they can, if there was a two-story home, they could have commercial on the top and convert that through our building department. And then the express standards that we have in code are really that 11.2D4, and that's where we actually require minimum height requirements for Old Town. So again, if it's something reused, doesn't apply. You know, if it's a single-story home, you don't require that. But then if you're going to do new construction, so in our, I guess in our Old Town zone, we have a very specific area defined as the urban core. And in that area, we want even more intensification. So, for example, the structure across the street from us that's kind of at a standstill currently, that's part of this urban core area that we defined. And so, again, we want a minimum height of 35 feet, but we grant them a maximum height of 100 feet. And that particular project to the east was approved to go up to 90 feet. So, and that's a pretty tall building in Meridian. And we're pretty flat here, so it's not hard to vision. You're going to see that building from many different points in Meridian. But again, that's the purpose, is intensify, get some of that synergy downtown, bring people downtown to a destination, it's the hub of our city, and that's what we encourage and support. Again, anything outside of that area, we're going to require a minimum 2-story construction. So if someone were to have a vacant lot in Old Town and they want to build a new home, we want it to be the 2-story construction. And I've seen a good example of that. I don't know exactly, I think it's on Carlton. There's a 2-story home that was built by the gentleman that has the wine business there on the corner. Right to his west, there's a 2-story home, and that the previous owner built that in conjunction while they operated their business. So I think that's a very good example of how someone could embrace the old, but also build something new and bring some new flavor to our downtown area. Streetscape improvements, I think a lot of you are aware of that. You see the bulb outs, the tree grates, the planters, bike racks, benches. That's what's required as part of our downtown area, really the core area. And we coordinate with the Parks Department on that in conjunction with Public Works. And then D is the one that, again, supports the conversion of using existing buildings. And again, there's the mention of the design standards that we require them to comply with to do that. And then hopefully as we get consolidation of these larger parcels, a lot of the parcels in downtown are smaller parcels, so to get anything of substantial size in downtown Meridian, you're going to have a public-private partnership to assimilate or consolidate some of those parcels and go vertical and provide some of these additional urban spaces that we'd like to see. But we do have some parks. We have Generations Plaza and the park over there off of 2nd Street. So again, we want to continue that heritage as well. So really, in a nutshell, that's what we do, or that's what Old Town zoning is. Again, it's adaptive reuse of existing structures, not necessarily preservation as it would imply. When you see the word Old Town, you think that it's meant for preservation. It can be, but it also means, in our world, it means reuse of a structure or intensification of a property or a change of use, converting something to a newer, higher, or best use is the term that we hear in the business. But again, that's what I have for you today. Happy to stand for any questions you may have.
Any questions?
I've got lots.
You have the floor.
Hit me with your best shot.
Yeah. Let me give you an example of something that might happen. Let's say down the street in Old Town, there's a nice Craftsman, 2-story, and it burns down. It's gone. And the owner wants to rebuild. And what they want to rebuild is a nice, modern, square-looking building. Is there anything that might prevent them from doing that?
Chair, members of the commission, there is not.
That's my concern.
Nothing in the
Right
zoning
there.
code that would actually, there's nothing in our code that preserves that, correct?
Yeah.
They will, again, if that structure were to burn down and they were to come to us and say, this is our proposal, if they meet the height requirements and they meet all the dimensional standards, the parking requirements, yeah, you are absolutely correct. We would issue an approval for them to build something new.
Another example is this building right across the street here at Main and East Broad. Very nice building. I think it's completely out of place for Old Town now. And I think that it would be, well, what I think there should be is something in place for some way so that that would have been built with a exterior that was in keeping with the rest of Old Town construction in some way. Buildings are going to come and go. Some of them we can't preserve for one reason or another because they burn down, for instance. But at least in the Old Town core, if there's going to be new construction or even renovation, I think there should be something in place that the buildings will be either constructed or renovated in such a way that they will be in keeping with the Old Town look. And we won't have these old buildings and new buildings and old buildings and new buildings in this hodgepodge look after a few years. That's my comments. I'm just wondering, what would it take to do that? I mean, is it just a matter of policy, or do we need to ingrain something in the city code, or what needs to be done?
Yeah, Chairman, members of the commission, it's a valid question. Certainly, yes, definitely code for sure. That's the world that I live in. As I mentioned to you, the comp plan is a guide. It's not. It's left for interpretation. It's left for. Again, they're not set in stone. So again, it's going to take the will of this commission and even council to say, staff, we want you to come back with some code changes and codify these things and put it in the code. That's the only way you're going to get that. Because I can tell you, I know the Keller building. It's not everyone's aesthetic, but that's the way the design is. A lot of times what's maybe attractive to you is not always attractive to everybody else, but I can tell you on that building, they did work with the Meridian Development Corporation. They worked with city staff, and they did meet the design standards that are in place for the Old Town Zone.
Yeah, well, and I don't have any qualms with necessarily the way they look, the Keller building or this other new structure across the street here.
Loss.
Yeah, they're beautiful buildings. It's just that they just don't belong where they're at. They got landed in the wrong place. And it seems to me like if there had been something in place, they just would have been designed, perhaps the interiors would have been exactly the same, there still would have been the same square footage, it would have cost the same cost, we just would have had a little bit of different look on the outside.
I'm with you. I think they're a very attractive building, but I would almost ask the commission, what other elements would you like to see? I guess if in my world, what is Old Town to this commission? Because you want craftsman style, you don't want any more than 2-story, you're okay with 3 stories, you want front porches, Old Town is getting the building to the street, creating that pedestrian zone, having big storefronts. So like an old historical downtown, some of those elements can be part of that. Is it all brick buildings? Is it, there's so many different things to it that it's pretty subjective.
Well, right now, if you look at Old Town, there are a lot of different elements. So you can almost pick and choose and still be in keeping. So I don't think it would be, well, it probably would be hard, because it's something that I think everybody might have a different idea of what they think Old Town should be. You have 10 people and you'll have 20 different opinions. I would just like to see some movement along that direction. Like I said, even if it was just a policy change now, and maybe we can move something to codify it so it's, sort of in concrete, literally and figuratively, for the future.
I think noted, and like I said, if you're ever in front of city council and have you expressed these concerns to them, I think it's probably worth a conversation.
Yeah, I've said my piece.
All right.
Any other comments before I step in?
I have one question. We didn't really touch too much on demolition, other than, if they meet the requirements, so somebody buys the property, they want to put in something bigger, taller, and it fits with what we want, what the city has set aside. What are the steps? If a building, say, is 50 years old or 100 years old, is there any special steps right now where you would say, oh, let's flag that and have somebody look at this building for historical purposes.
Chairman, members of the commission, no, there is nothing in our code that does that. If someone wants to demo a home, then they go through our building department and pull a demo permit. I can tell you that at least a lot of times when people want to develop properties in downtown, if they come and talk to staff, and they have to go through that design review process, and I'll give you a recent example of what we were dealing with. So the Dorian Studio structure over there on Main, he wants to add accessory structure on the back of his property. He needs a shed. He needs storage for his business in his home. And that's one thing that I asked him. I'm like, if at all, and I know there's a historical placard out there, so I'm very sensitive to that, and I'm appreciative of that because I think it's a beautiful building structure. And I said, whatever you can do, make sure the shed matches the home. That's really, although it's not necessarily required by code, we do encourage people to try to stay with that theme and mimic the current architecture on the property because I think it's important. I don't want him to tear down the Model A garage off the back or the storage shed and then put up a two-car metal structure on it. Does it fit? It could, but it's not the most attractive. So, and that owner said he is committed to doing that. He wants something that looks like that historic home, and I hope that is the case because that's what I hope to see when he comes in with his application. But we try to encourage that where we can, yes. But not always. Our hands are tied a little bit because of the code.
Ms. Schiffler.
So, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, and Mr. Parsons. So I don't know if you got a chance to read through the draft memo that we have, but that is the demolition process is something that is addressed in the memo as something that the commission, assuming that you approved the memo to bring to council, that is something to look at. And if through the landmarking program, there were certain properties that were identified as important, then there would be ways through the demo process to kind of just flag it so that maybe if they're in the landmarking program, then that gets reviewed instead of a little bit more of an over-the-counter process than it is now.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. Thank you.
Mr. Parsons, I'm going to step in. I've got a couple of questions. Part of it goes back to Commissioner Freese's comments. Old Town, I think for most people, Old Town thinks of Meridian, Main Street, basically from here to Cherry. But it actually is south of the railroad tracks, all the way to Cherry, 3 or 4 blocks either side of those two roads, correct?
That is correct. It's a larger area. I'm happy to go ahead and bring my map back.
I guess my question
The area
is...
right there is Old Town.
Right. What is the chances of redefining Old Town so that, and I don't know what term we could use, whatever, so we're looking at, okay, just this Meridian Road to Main Street or to First Street from here north, so those old homes are in that area. I think what Commissioner Freese is looking at is, can we set up a standard, sub-architectural standard for that section of Old Town so that, yeah, okay, this is what we want to preserve, no more than 2 stories, 3 stories. So the scale of those homes, anything new matches what's there existing. I think that's what Commissioner Freese is talking about. Because you look at the lofts, I like the lofts, I like the Keller building, but the scale of those buildings don't fit what everything else is. We don't have the power to say yes or no or anything. We've never been in that spot to do so. But is there a way to reinvent the wheel a little bit on that Old Town district? Say, okay, if you're going to be from here to here, here to here, this is a little subgroup of Old Town. Can we bring the scale down a little bit to meet what's there? Building size, door sizes, window sizes, placements, they match. Whether it's a Craftsman or a Tudor home or a bungalow, those all have about the same size of openings and stuff like that. Possibility.
It's the Chair, Commissioners, it's possible.
Okay.
Yes, you can write code to do those things and call that out. But again, is the political will to do that?
Right, I understand. Yeah.
That's where you and I are at the mercy of being asked to look into that and do something like that. But I don't disagree with you. The other thing is, I know right now, so going back to can you shrink the boundary of Old Town? I don't think that's what you mean, to shrink the boundary. You just mean just better define the areas
Yeah,
that are
better
subject
define
to
it.
specific guidelines, or
Yeah.
more specific guidelines than what we currently have.
Yeah.
Yes, you can do that.
Okay. So maybe that's something that, as a commission, as we go forward, like I said, Meridian's growing so fast, and try and preserve what's going on right now, if we have to work with planning or whatever, say, okay, let's redefine Old Town or have a subset of Old Town to whatever term we want to call it or planning wants to call it, say, this is the scale that we want to try and preserve. Again, we'll have to go before planning and zoning, we'll have to go before the city council to get everybody's buy-in on it. But I think that's the route we have to go back to Commissioner Giacomo's comment. Demolition plan. Not that we want to stop it, but can we delay it for 30 days? Can HPC have a chance to document what's there before it is gone?
And also, would someone be interested in moving the structure instead of tearing it to the ground?
Exactly, yes.
Yeah, it's like it's a process, right? You take it one
Yeah.
step at a time, and you get your wins where you can get your wins. So absolutely. I think, if I remember correctly, even the presentation to council on some of these topics that we're discussing today, I think we even asked council if they wanted us to go that direction, did they want us to have a separate design review board to look at that? Because I know our neighbor to the east has some of those. They have historic preservation committees, and they look at those changes, and they do act on that, or at least have a review of that, purview of that. So again, yes, the tools are there. It's just whether or not we go to that next level when the city wants to get there or go there.
I've got one more question for you. So on any development in Old Town, it doesn't matter where at, if they're converting an existing structure, residential to commercial, or just, say, rebuilding a residential and going up a story, adding on to it, is there still a design review for any project in Old Town?
Chair, members of the commission, no, we do not do design review for single-family homes.
Okay,
So, correct. All we're looking for is it a two-story construction?
okay,
And that's why you've seen some of the not-so-attractive two-story units pop up here in downtown, because we are very limited on what we can require.
okay.
And that was part of the other discussion, too. At one point in time, is like, do we want to further define the single-family residential standards as well?
Okay.
They're-
Schiffler.
They're exempt from design review.
Okay,
In all districts, to be honest with you. We do not do design review on single-family homes.
okay.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, to again kind of relate this back to the landmarking program and to Commissioner Freese's earlier question about say that the property is one that is on the landmarking program and it burned down. Because it would be on the landmarking program, it actually would be flagged to go to the commission to have that 60-day sort of waiting period. And again, this wouldn't necessarily stop or change anything, but it would give the commission time to weigh in on it and potentially negotiate and have a voice in properties that are on that program.
Any other comments? Mr. Neri, I have a question for you. Since we're going to talk about this landmarking program, is it acceptable to have Mr. Parsons sit down on this so he can listen to this?
If he wants to, certainly, sure.
Mr. Parsons, you been willing to listen to our little presentation?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, be happy to.
Perfect. So the next comment or next topic is our draft memo to City Council on the landmarking program. Ms. Schiffler, can you bring that up for us? So, Mr. Parsons, what we want to do is, since we don't have a lot of homes, buildings in downtown that are actually eligible for the national listing, SHPO asked us, State Historic Preservation Office, to look at properties that are of historical and cultural significance to the city, and what those buildings are important-wise, and whether it's Epi's or some of those other places downtown, they've been around here for a long time, but are they important to try and keep preserved for the city? So we're going to try and mark these properties and get them documented. So like Ms. Schiffler said, is if someone wants to come in for the demo permit, we're flagged so we have a chance to look at them. I'm losing my voice, so I may ask Ms. Schiffler to step in and talk, or Commissioner Giddings, so I'm losing my voice.
Chairman and Commissioners, so this is, I know you've seen the memo in its earlier versions that Sherry had presented, and that in that form it was from our consultant to you. So now this is a revised one, and I've used the city letterhead because the idea is that now this would be presented from the commission to city council to look at the landmarking program and some of the other things that have been brought up, like the demo permit. So, and again, just to kind of review what the landmarking program is, this is something we initially looked at because the State Historic Preservation Office, we were talking about some of the like options that you have, and some of those bigger conservation overlays, maybe we don't have the, there's not the political willpower at the moment, but they thought maybe we should look into this landmarking program. So there's only 2 other cities that have a landmarking program in the state of Idaho, which is Boise and Ketchum, but there are also some that Sherry researched in Wyoming and some other places. And it's a little different. It has less regulations than a conservation overlay. But the kind of one of the main things is what I was just talking about. Like if these properties were flagged for part of the landmarking program, then, and this is per, I'm gonna try and skip down to this is the state code, the relevant statute. I think this is kind of maybe the more relevant part is that if a historic property designated by ordinance as herein provided may be demolished, material altered, remodeled, relocated, or put to a different use, and this says 180 days. So this could be, the number of days could be determined by the commission. Written notice of the owner's proposed action has been given to the local Historic Preservation Commission. During this period, the commission may negotiate with the owner or with any other parties in that effort to find a means of preserving the property. So, and again, because this isn't a regulatory commission, it wouldn't necessarily stop anything from happening, but would might be a bit of a speed bump, if you will. And the properties that would be, and something that hasn't been determined, I'm going to skip to some of the next steps, is that this commission should sort of think about what criteria would be used for the landmarking program. I think the most obvious one is that it is for eligible National Historic Registry properties, but some properties that have been mentioned, like Modern Woodman Hall, which is not eligible but might be significant and important, so might include some of these things for criteria. Some of the other programs, like the City of Ketchum's had a specific list of, I think it was like 25 properties or something, and they landmarked it in that way. So might come up with a list. And we are sort of talking about a much smaller list of properties than the conservation overlay, because it would probably be, I don't know, but we also could sort of, instead of being a contiguous area, could sort of include all the ones that are on the National Historic Registry, so it might include some farms and things that are not in the downtown area, but all the properties that are eligible for the National Historic Register. That's my quick summary as I understand it. There's not a lot of big changes since the last round of this memo, and unfortunately we're out of budget for Sherry to be here and help, but I will try to answer any questions.
I don't have any questions, so
I just wondered when you were planning on presenting this council.
Great question. So it's, assuming approval, probably in the next month or two. and would encourage the whole commission to come to that meeting.
I read through the document and it looked fine to me.
Yeah.
I think there's going to be a ton of questions, and I just hope that everyone would be prepared to answer those
Yeah.
questions. When I read through this, I thought, well, if I was a member of council, what questions would I have? And I had about 5 million that popped into my head. And we're not going to council here with a formed plan. We're going to them with really just an idea. And if they look at it that way, then I think we'll probably have a better outcome than if they think that, we should have a formed plan. Just kind of follow on to what some of you other commissioners have talked about. I think one of the things that we should be in favor of, or at least I personally am in favor of, is having a little more stricter design review standards in the city, whether it's Old Town or whether it's out at 10 Mile. I'm a lifelong resident of Meridian. I'm one of the old timers, and I remember back, when there was no design review in Meridian, but our neighbors over in Eagle had pretty strict design review. And as a result of that, it seemed like their growth was more moderated. Maybe their growth was more regulated. I'm not sure that's an entirely good thing, but, I've kind of come to a point in my life where I think maybe it is a good thing to have a little bit of regulation. My understanding of the city's comprehensive plan is that the city of Meridian values the historical significance of our history. And part of our history is our buildings and the farmsteads around here. So I'm really in favor of this landmarking program. I just think that we need to proceed carefully and think about, what it is we're wanting to do. Recently, I went onto the website that SHPO has. What's the name of that again? I forgot the name of it.
ICRIS.
ICRIS. So I went on there and I went ahead and I did a data dump out of ICRIS for everything that had a Meridian address. And I don't know all of the criteria in ICRIS, but I think it's all the structures that are over 50 years old. And there was, as you might imagine, several hundred.
And they're
on
only going to
there.
have the ones that are surveyed.
Yeah. Yeah, only the ones that are surveyed was on there. So the list is pretty big, but a house that's over 50 years old could still be a tract house that was built in the 1970s. So we just have to proceed carefully, I think, and we have to think through what it is that makes sense. Like I said, I believe that some design review on the city's part would be helpful when it comes to what we're all calling Old Town. I think a lot of us would have similar ideas of what that would be, and we could disagree about the architecture of a building, but all of these buildings we're talking about, had there been more specific design review guidelines at the time that they were approved, they might look different today, right? They might have more of the look and feel that we expect from something we would call Old Town. All right, I've said my piece, thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Giacomo.
I have a question. Ms. Scheffler, do we have any budget for Sherry to attend the meeting that you're talking about where we would present to the commission?
Not within our current contract, but could probably, I think, I can find out how much it would cost and could do a small secondary contract.
If that would be something people think would be worthwhile?
I think it'd be very worthwhile to have her here. Realistically, we're probably not looking until probably October to present this to council. That's the beginning of our fiscal year, so we would have funds at that point to pay her. So I think, yeah, if Ms. Schifter could talk to her, say, what would it cost for you to attend city council meeting in an evening? If she could get a little contract together for that, I think that'd be more than appropriate.
May I ask, what's the strategy for waiting so long?
Just get on their agenda.
Their agenda is packed up that far in advance? And I'm not saying it's not, but I'd be surprised.
It's typically a month. So
We're looking mid-September, or late
Yeah,
September.
and also on a slightly more personal note, August and September are my busiest season for me at the city. I've got the concerts on Broadway and a lot of other projects coming to a head, so October might give me a little more breathing room to prepare.
All right.
Any other comments on our landmarking program, draft memo? Okay, hearing none, we'll go on. Mr. Parsons, thank you for sitting in on this. Do you have any questions for us before you leave?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, pleasure being here with you. I appreciate the tough questions too, because I know what you're trying to do. I feel your passion. Like I said, I've been here 17 years. I'm passionate about City of Meridian too, so I get it. I don't want everything torn down for new either. I do like the old because I'm getting old. But I do appreciate you asking me to come talk with you today, and I hope we get to see more of each other in the future.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, we'll go on to item 7, Commissioner Conference.
Sorry, can I ask for a vote?
Oh, yeah. So, vote. Get a motion for a vote for approval of our draft memo to City Council.
Yeah, I move that we approve the revised draft memo to the city council for their landmarking program analysis.
Second that.
Motion by Commissioner Freeze, second by Commissioner Giddings for approval of our draft memo on the landmarking program. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you so much. Now we'll go on to item 7. Commissioner Conference registration reimbursement for the cost of the Pass Forward National Preservation Conference in Louisiana in September or October. I have already put in my registration for that. As you guys know, part of our CLG, Certified Local Government certification, is that we have to have so much continuing education units every year for a commission as a whole. So with that, do we have a motion to approve reimbursement amount of $665 for Commissioner Johnston's participation of that conference?
So moved.
I second.
Motion by Commissioner Giddings, second by Commissioner Freeze for approval of reimbursement to Commissioner Johnston for the amount of $665. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Item 8, panel presentation of Meridian Historic Preservation Initiative. I can't talk anymore. Ms. Schiffler, would you please give us an update on that?
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, so this was, we mentioned this in an earlier meeting. There is an American Planning Association Idaho chapter meeting in Moscow, and our consultant Sherry has proposed a panel which was accepted for the conference. And I proposed that to my leadership, and it sounds like the budgets are approved. So it looks like I can go to that conference and help present on that panel about what Meridian is doing for historic preservation efforts, and talk about the landmarking program. I think there's a couple other cities that will be there, and Dan Everhart from SHPO. Sorry.
So, since Ms. Schiffler works for the city, there's no funds out of our budget that will pay for that. That will all come out of Parks Department's budget. But is there any questions for Ms. Schiffler for that? Have fun, good luck. Item 9, discussion planning of our guided historic walking tours. Commissioner Freeze headed one this month. We had 14 people partake in that, which I thought was an extraordinarily good number. It lasted an hour and a half,
Yeah.
something like that.
And we didn't lose any.
Yeah, we didn't lose anybody. And it was warm, but not real hot. But yeah, we had little kids, older people. They stuck with us for the whole hour and a half. So, Mr. Commissioner Freeze, your take on?
The one change I made was we kind of went in reverse. So we hit the school a lot earlier, because I know in the past we've lost some people, and I thought the school was something really sort of remarkable to see, and I want to make sure people saw that. So we kind of went in a reverse order. We didn't do the leg that goes north. That leg extends the time of the tour quite a bit because we kind of have to backtrack because we have to go up and then we have to come back down. So I avoided that part. So we made basically a big circle, but I think it went really well. I think everybody really liked the school. The school was really a really neat part of the tour.
Yeah, I think it went really well. Ms. Schiffler posted on social media that we had that many people doing it. We already had somebody that day ask when we were going to do it again. So I said we're planning on September, but did not have a date. But watch our social media posts, and we'd have a date. So looking at this, the third Saturday of September is the 21st. If we want to plan on that Saturday or another Saturday, what's in everybody's schedule?
Yeah, I'm going to be on the Grand Canyon that day.
Okay, fine. You won't be here. So I'm planning on, it's on my calendar, so I can lead. I did hand out our challenge coins to all 14 participants, and they all took it. Exciting. So I've got some more that we'll hand out when we do the next tour. So we'll just plan on the 21st of September.
10 a.m.?
10 a.m. With that, if you see in front of you, there's a proposed new brochure for a walking tour. Ms. Schiffler, would you give us a little information on this, please?
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, yes, we have a big surprise for you. So this is Paxton. She's the city's seasonal arts coordinator or seasonal arts assistant, and so she's here. It's unfortunately a seasonal position, but she's mostly been working with me on a lot of the arts projects. But she has some great graphic design knowledge and background, and so she revamped the historic walking tour brochure. I've been hearing some of the comments. Commissioner Pitts had actually said they should have numbers, which, yeah, they should have numbers. So this kind of updates. There's numbers on the map. It's one-sided instead of a brochure, so people could potentially print it off at home. One thing about that, though, it's hard to fit all that information, so this is condensed a little bit. We have a little bit less text. And there was a version that had the images, which looked really nice, but it didn't have the text. So this is not final. Happy to have any feedback, get your review. And this QR code is still not working, but I'll fix that. I've been working with IT. Did you want to add anything?
Hi, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. I also want to note the white lines on the brochure are not supposed to be there. Our printer, unfortunately, when we print on both sides, they don't line up perfectly. I did not want to cut off any information, so I left the white lines. So the brochure, when it is printed professionally, it will not have those outside white borders. And also for the theme of the brochure, I wanted to kind of refresh the color scheme and the general vibe of the brochure. The original one, as you know, had a kind of coffee stain filter on it, more vintage antique look. I still wanted to incorporate some of those elements into this new brochure, but also refreshing the colors and keeping in with the same colors of the city of Meridian, so gold, blue, black, and white, some gray as well. So yeah, I just wanted to make it a little bit more refreshed and classy.
I looked at it when I first got here, and I think it looks tremendous. I like the colors. I like the little fax details on the back. I don't know where you got them, but I think that's wonderful. In fact, I was going to talk to Ms. Schiffler about that first one, about Eliza Zenger, if we could get a Facebook post on that out there, because I think that's some good information. Yeah, I think it looks really good. Yeah, the text is smaller, but it's as blind as I am, I can read it. And then, besides that, I think it's going to save us a lot in just printing costs, not having those other copies, as a side note. All thing I'm going to ask is, Commissioner, read through this. If you can see any obvious mistakes, let Ms. Schiffler know so they can get it corrected. But yeah, I think this is going to be a great brochures to put out.
I have, as having been in public relations for more years than I want to admit, and being behind the production of more of these brochures than I want to admit, I'm a big fan of the fourfold. Get a lot more information in there. And I do like the look of this, and it may have sacrificed a little bit of information, but I think it's got, it looks really nice, especially when you can fold this out and see everything in one nice sort of view. I think this is a real nice addition. When we were talking about possibly abandoning this one entirely, I like this, but I also realize this is expensive, because I've done some like this and bigger. And I had one client one time that ended up spending so much on the brochure, they didn't want to give it out to anybody, which was frightening. But yeah, I think this is a great transition from what we've had. Thank you.
Where does the QR code, where will it take people when they scan it?
meridiancity.org/history, which is the main page.
Mr. Commissioner?
Commissioner Shea?
Chairman?
Yeah.
Can I ask, the 17, the number 17, is it supposed to be the larger circle, the smaller circle south of that, or is it kind of that, does it overlap that whole, both corners?
Yeah, so for number 17, we decided to make a special section in the back for, do you mind if I have that really quick? Thank you. The East Idaho Avenue Historic Area. So the 17 does encompass both sections, even the one across the street. We did discuss possibly taking out the Rice Pharmacy, the one across the street, or is it the Hone Building? I believe. Hoyne Buildings, my apologies, because it is across the street and it doesn't quite look as nice when it's two 17s on the page. But in our notes that talk about the details of the East Idaho Avenue Historic Area, it does also include the Hoyne Building as well.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Ms. Schiffler?
Commissioner Giacomo, do you think it should just be 117?
I understand why there's two now because of the one across the street. I don't know how, if there was 117 that overlapped both corners or two smaller 17s, I'm not sure.
Could you move that big 17 just down like it's almost in the intersection?
I do like that idea. I can play around with it and see if it looks good.
Okay.
I can provide a version of that.
Designer's option.
It is a wonderful brochure. I love the colors. I love everything. I love the numbers. That was something we were talking about for the walking tour booklet that we have, is the numbers on a map. The population, the little quick notes on the very back, the fun facts, if you will. Yeah, I love it.
Any other comments? Looks wonderful. Thank you so much for your hard work. With that, we'll go on to item 10, other project updates, Egger Farmstead Development. Mr. Neri, can you let us know what's going on with our agreement with Mr. Barton?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. So the council had approved the transfer of that barn to a city site for storage during the interim until we can find a location. We've reached a impasse at the moment with the property because the developer does not want to retain ownership. He basically wants to disassemble the property and transfer to the city and be done with it. That was not what the council agreed to. So we're looking for an alternative. The city, I was explaining to the chairman before the meeting, for the city to take ownership of the property makes it problematic later if we were to then want to put the property on some other piece of property that doesn't belong to the city. So we're looking for an alternative to at least hold the property, a private entity, a nonprofit, to hold it as owners of the property until we can find a permanent location. There was a number of discussions at the council meeting in regards to this property and whether it would eventually potentially end up back on the site in a different location, end up in a city property in another part of the city, or end up in a private property but for public display. So since we haven't really zeroed in on a final landing spot for this, we're still trying to determine where that's going to go. We just need to kind of iron out this one interim step of where who's going to own it while we store it. And so we're working on that. I'm working on that. I'm going to have some contact with the library to see if they'd be willing to do it. We already have an existing relationship with them, with the historical society's transfer of their materials to them. So we'll see if we can make this work out, but we'll get it figured out.
Can the developer move forward on any work out there unless you have an agreement signed, he can't do anything?
Nope.
Okay,
So,
theoretically.
yes, theoretically.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Neri. SHPO grant, Ms. Schiffler.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, so I met with the Grants Committee. We have a new process for grants, by the way, with the city, so it has to go through the Grants Committee. And although this grant was submitted before that change, I did want to just meet with the committee, make sure everyone was on the same page. Everything looks good, so it's currently on the posted City Council consent agenda for next week, so that's the next step, is they'll approve it, and then I'll send it back to SHPO so they can execute it.
So once they do that, we need to complete the historic preservation plan before we get that grant money, correct?
So it's a reimbursement style grant, so we'll do
Right.
work, and then, yeah, they'll reimburse.
Okay. So our next step on the preservation plan is to send that out to a vendor?
So, so we can't commence with any work until October 1, but we can get the proposal. And Sherry from JUB is going to submit a proposal. She wants to kind of wrap up everything with the landmarking program.
Right.
But she is working on a proposal.
Okay. Perfect. I think any other future topics we need to talk about next month? Ms. Schiffler, when you come back for our October meeting, if you give us a discussion on what took place there. I'll have one for November meeting on the Pass Forward Conference. Those are only two topics. We'll keep plugging away with everything else, the landmarking program and updates on our historic preservation plan, so. And our on our preservation plan. We'll just keep plugging away with those. Any other discussion? With that, our next meeting will be on September 26, 2024. Get a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we adjourn this meeting.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Freeze, second by Commissioner Giddings for adjournment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We're done. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.